Welcome to the Empowering Choices Parenting Podcast. My name is Joshua.
I'm Erik.
I am Lucas.
Erik and Lucas are licensed professional counselors. We have created an online community with a website and an app full of parenting resources and courses. Most importantly, all of this is centered around a private community where you can share your struggles with us and others. If you are interested in joining, please check out our website at empoweringchoices.community or search for our app in the App Store by searching Empowering Choices. For a small monthly fee, you receive everything I talked about and you help support the show. Plus, every time someone purchases a membership, we gift a membership on your behalf to someone who otherwise could not afford it. All right, now on with today's show.
And today we're going to continue our conversation about boundaries.
Does anyone remember where we left off?
With boundaries.
Thank you. Thank you for that uber enlightening.
Well, you asked.
Yes.
I mean, come on. You should know me, better than that by now. Give me a hole I can drive a Mack truck through, and I'm going to try and put a train through it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
I think we need a boundary over that hole to stop Erik from driving things through. Anyway. So we were talking about the fundamentals of boundaries, what they are, kind of places, what they are and why you might need them, places where they could go. And it seems like we had kind of some additional specifics, or I don't know if I want to say that these are advanced techniques, but it's just kind of some additional detail on the topic. And the first bullet point you have here listed, Erik, is silly putty. So I think we need to talk about that.
I'm curious.
Well, we are gonna talk about that, but it's kind of in the way that you're talking about this.
Are you going to leave us in suspense about the silly putty?
It might be a little silly, but yes. And so it will work into itself.
Silly putty does that.
Yes, it does. But the thing is we're going to get a little bit more detailed with boundaries today. We talked about them in the last podcast as kind of an overall pieces, but and the silly putty is a really great example. I had a client that told me that, silly putty was something that, her brother got when, they were growing up, and he mashed it into the carpet that her stepmom said, "You will never have silly putty ever, ever, ever again." And
That sounds like a boundary.
Right. And she said, and you know what she did? He didn't. He never had silly putty again. And I was like, silly putty, I remember when this first came out. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I'd seen it, on the commercials, and, it could, pick up the ink. And so, you press it against something and the picture was on the silly putty. And I'm like, this is so cool. And I remember standing, in front of the silly putty in the store going, this is so cool. And my mom is standing over me going, this could be so disastrous.
She saw it coming earlier than your client, apparently.
Yeah, she was like, I don't know about this. But we were able to talk her into, purchasing silly putty. And then it went like this. And as I was telling my client about this, that here's how it worked in our house. Mom and Dad always had the silly putty. We never had the silly putty.
There's no free range silly putty.
There was no free range. It was the same way with like slime or, anything like that.
This wasn't the only thing in your house that fell into this category.
Yes, because at that time you made your own Play-Doh a lot, and so we didn't have that in the room. That was not happening. And so when we wanted to play with the silly putty, we had to tell our parents, we want to play with the silly putty. Mm-hmm. And one of them would break off with us. Mm-hmm. They would have us go to the kitchen table, which was a great big kitchen table. And there was a plastic tablecloth over it. If there wasn't, they put one on it very quickly. It's an antique table. And then they would get out the comics, from the Sunday newspapers and things, and spread them out there. And we could put the silly putty on there, and we could pick up all these comics, and it was so cool, and it was so fun. And they were right there with us. Mm-hmm. And about that time, my client said, yeah, that's not what we do. We set our kids up with something, and then we go into the other room.
And she was talking about her current family because she's a parent now.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so she was going, this is a missing piece. Mm. Our kids are not figuring out how to work with we'll just say, silly putty.
Independently on their own, without supervision.
Exactly. And so a part of, because there's something in our culture, and, some of that is because I did, hundreds of hours of looking at parenting material as we were, working on our manual, working on the podcast. And I cannot tell you around the world how much information is out there about just give your kids space, just give them what they want, and they'll figure it out. And I'm like sitting there smacking myself in the head going, no, they won't. Now, will some kids figure it out? Yes, they're the exceptions. Sure. But most human beings do not just figure it out. You know what they do? They press silly putty into the carpet.
Right, exactly.
You have a really good tip for parents when they have silly putty into the carpet.
Well, the thing that I recently ran across was chewing gum in the carpet, and I'm unsure if silly putty reacts the same way. But what I learned is that canned compressed air is if you use that on particularly chewing gum. I saw this work for myself.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
Because this actually worked. I did it. You spray the compressed air against the chewing gum, and the reason chewing gum sticks into carpet is because it's like gooey and malleable. The compressed air comes out of the can very cold, and it turns the chewing gum hard and cold and brittle, and you can kind of break it out of the carpet in a much easier fashion. We were discussing this, and I don't know if it works with silly putty. Haven't tried it. I also don't know if it works for getting chewing gum out of hair.
Or silly putty out of hair.
Or silly putty out of hair. So I know it works with chewing gum in carpet. I don't know if it can be extrapolated to other things. The other recommendations I saw for chewing gum in carpet were things that would break the chewing gum down, like vinegar, right? Some like mildly caustic chemicals. I tried that. It was not as effective as the canned air.
So we wanted that to be
need,
a little bit of a tip there, right? Because, all human beings have wills of their own.
For when your children push the boundaries,
yes,
you may need canned air.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that our society, because we're so on this type of a thinking that kids will figure it out, is that even though our science and our technologies have shown us that that's really not the case, but one of the things that we forget as we're thinking about this is, where do babies come from?
It's not a trick question.
It's not a trick question. Babies are formed in mom. What knowledge do they get imparted with as they are being put together?
Knowledge, not a whole lot.
Now, their personality,
exactly,
their temperament, there are characteristics that are put there from mom, from dad. These are all they're all there, and they're all being formed. But when baby comes out, he does not know that a coffee cup is called a coffee cup.
Right.
These are things that he has to learn. There's molded pieces. We're expecting them to come into the world with absolute knowledge. Here, let me give you scissors and markers, and you will be able to have fun.
At age 1.
Right. And you come back in, and somebody's got, cut up clothing and things around the house are cut up, and markers are everywhere. And they're like, oh, I guess they're figuring it out. I'm like, no, they're not.
I guess they're figuring it out.
It doesn't work like that. Parenting is being actively involved. You have to be there. And we do this, because there are people who are going to say, no, they just need to figure it out. Okay, why does kindergarten start with, this is a marker. This is the cap on the marker. Pull the cap. Aha. Now, you have a marker that you can use. But if you do not put the cap back on the marker, the marker will dry up and you can't use it. So, class, put the cap on and now press. Did you hear that click? We should have had a marker for this. Well, did you have that click? There it is. Well, that's a little too much clicking. Just one click, but the click
They'll
is
learn
there.
that skill really quickly.
Right. Yeah, that gets them detention, like in the first grade. But the click means marker's on, marker won't dry up. And we learned this in preschool. So, what am I doing as an adult decades later? I'm going to use my marker. I pick up the cap. I'm putting the cap on. And the first thing I have in the back of my mind is, did it click? Click. Okay, it's on. We have to learn that. Baby didn't come out with markers.
Well, and there was something in kind of a recent episode that we did that was children don't come out of the womb learning how to share their toys.
Right.
It's the same principle. They don't come
Yes.
out of the womb knowing much of anything.
Right. And I mean, they have the basics of needs and abilities to be able to ask for those needs
Yeah, with one tool,
with one tool.
right? Screaming.
Exactly. The voice has several different meanings to it. You're experiencing this.
Yeah, they're all loud.
But you just don't have the baby going, I'd really like to have a bit of orange juice this morning. I've been having this bottled milk forever, and honestly, it's getting old. What about some coffee? When am I ready for that?
The increased communication would be appreciated. The attitude would not be. But inevitably, if babies had that ability, it would come with that attitude.
Well, correct, because, the scenario goes on. You don't get a bunch of a little bit, you get a bunch of the whole bit. So if they can talk like that, I see that we are now up here this morning and pancakes are on the menu again. Really? I was hoping for French toast at the age of 2,
Did we get transported to Britain all of a sudden?
Oh, come on, guys,
I think, too, the thing that's interesting is, some kids get a hold of things quicker than others and figure it out. I think I was just a curious mind. And I hate to admit that this was the 6th grade that I did this, but that sticky tack teachers use to put stuff, it's
Very related to silly putty.
Very similar.
The blue
so
tack.
I was bored out of my mind in some class, and I'm sitting there and there's a poster and I get some sticky tack. And then I just thought it would be funny. This was the sweetest girl that never got in trouble, just was very calm, very quiet. She had this long, flowy hair.
Of course she did.
I thought, it'd be funny just to kind of put that in her hair and then show her, and then just take it out after she freaked out.
And then just take it out.
Yeah,
no big deal.
So I meshed it in her hair.
It's kind of like pulling up a worm.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So I got it. I meshed it in her hair. I showed her. She did freak out. But then when it came time for me just to pluck it out, I was like,
It didn't happen so well.
this doesn't work this way.
You're pulling roots.
Yeah, so we ended up down at the office with her, with the school nurse crying with scissors, and me seeing the principal due to my action. And then I learned, but I never forgot it. But, some kids hopefully would learn that sooner. But, I figured that out in the 6th grade.
It's so, and you're describing human learning and a difference in thinking, whereas when babies are born, human babies are born, our thinking is located at the back of the brain, the emotional center. They're emotional thinkers first, primary, and logical thinkers secondary. When you get to age 18, between age 18 and 22, and I'm just going to hold to that, so I know there's debate, but we're just holding to that for the moment. That's when the brain shift begins from the back of the brain to the front of the brain, which adult thinking is primarily logical, secondarily emotional. And for everybody who just said, oh, you don't know Jeb, Jeb is absolutely the reverse. Yeah, there's exceptions, and so, we're going to go with that. But that's a part of kind of how that learning process goes. Your motivation was, oh, this will be funny.
Right.
Emotion. It's a story we won't talk about now, but, when I got sent into the principal's office, in middle school, which happened a lot, and the principal didn't even look up because I had a desk in his office. I was the only kid ever that had a desk in his office with work already ready to go. And even if he was in conferences, I could just come in and work.
Wow.
Yeah. And it wasn't that I was a bad kid. It's
I was just
that,
curious. It wasn't bad.
Yeah, it's that school didn't cover, things that my mind was covering. And so, one day I walked into his office and, he didn't even look up from what he was doing. And he just said, really, Mr. Denton, really?
He'd gotten a heads up.
Yeah, you couldn't have just asked me and I would have told you that, yes, this is the way it works.
You wouldn't have believed him.
I wouldn't have. And that's the thing. Yeah. I got the exact same thing when I went home that night. My dad was sitting at the kitchen table And I want you to picture Sean Connery in the Indiana Jones movies, you know, where he's Sean Connery, the dad, always has those books, always has those things going. And he's just always like, yes, yes, Indy, you go, you have fun, you do well. And that was my dad. He was a genius, and I'm walking in, he's in the middle of a project, and he didn't even look up, and he goes, really, son, you couldn't have just asked me? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, all right, it was bad.
Getting the point.
All right, I got it. Okay, ask next time. But like you said, Josh, I wouldn't have believed him.
Right. Yeah.
I'd have been like, I don't think so. We're gonna have to test this out. And that's kind of on that emotional piece. But that's a needed piece for human learning. Did I ever do that thing again that I haven't even shared what it was that I did? No.
Right. Yeah.
And many of the other things too.
Yeah. And I remember like even connecting the dots of like nothing in my mind thought that this could go wrong and would make her cry. Right. I was just thinking this is going to be funny. Everyone's going to look and think that's great. And I'll just pull it out. But then later, as I'm realizing like, oh, this was really bad. Like she's in there crying and may have her hair cut. You know, I'm thinking, okay. And then I'm feeling bad myself. But that is part of that process. Yeah, that was me learning. And I've never done it again.
Right.
So
and
your wife appreciates that.
She does.
Right. It's a part of the boundaries that we're learning. And as we have adult involvement, because really life is a series and layers of boundaries. Right. And we begin to learn what those are in childhood in our homes. My parents really knew what they were talking about when they weren't going to give us the silly putty. Because I'm telling you, I would have tested it on everything, including the cat's face. I'm just telling you, you know, well, that didn't work well. And here's the blood to prove it. And it helps me that I never went there because I would have gone there, you know. And so parental involvement, parental nurturing is helping us, you know, learn what are the things that we need to learn as we're growing up that our minds can't comprehend because developmentally we don't have that logical pieces yet.
Right.
You have another story here about boundaries as an older child. Did we want to cover that today or leave that for a new episode?
Oh, I've got to think here.
It's literally listed there, driving across the state. That story.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. All right, so that we can work with that.
I gave him an opening. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Now you're going to get the story. Here it comes.
The story.
Everybody duck.
Okay, so I resisted so much for the other story. So, you know, that'll have to be in a little different podcast. But, you know, this one, yeah, we're there. A part of the reasons why this, I think, makes a really good story, which I put in our parenting manual too, is that my parents teaching us those boundaries as we're kids. Now I'm getting into being a teenager, and everybody has these mythical ideas that when your teenagers become teenagers, everything is so much worse. In reality, if you didn't get in there and get your hands in the dirt as they're toddlers and grade schoolers, that's not a myth. If you were in there and involved all along, that's a myth.
It'll be just another phase of development.
Oh yeah, you know, this rebelliousness that we keep getting, you know, stamped with. Yes, there is a pulling away of parents, but it doesn't have to be rebellious. It doesn't have to be like that. When I got a car at age 17, I got it at 16, but by the time I was 17, I had several buddies, and especially one, Tim. Tim was a basketball junkie. I mean, he had to play it. He had to watch it. He had the ball in his room. He was always bouncing it. I mean, if he went more than 3 hours without a game, he would shake. He's like, we need a game. We need a game. We got to play. We got to play. And Tim was really good. I mean, he was a great basketball player. And so one day, he's like, we got to go. We got to find a pickup game. And it was like Saturday morning. And I'm like, great, let's go down to the park. And so, you know, we told our parents we were going down to the park. And we went down there, and there weren't very many pickup games. That, you know, it didn't last very long. But we met two of our other friends there who also like basketball, and we're like, "Hey, we need to go play." And Tim's like, "All right, let's go over let's go to Pendleton. Let's go over there and play." You know, that's like 60 minutes away. And so we found a payphone. We called our parents. We told them where we were going, and off to Pendleton we went. Went over there, not very many pickup games. Hey, let's go over to Hermiston. Went over to Hermiston after we found a payphone, called our parents, told them what we were doing. No cell phones at this time. And so by, 4 o'clock, we're in Seaside. We're all the way across the state.
Right.
Playing pickup games.
4 hours
4
by
hours
car.
away.
Wow.
Called our parents and said, okay, because they knew we were going to Seaside, but we had to call them when we got there. And so we called our parents, and my mom said, okay, here's when you're going to be home, and here's when you have to leave to do it. And I was like, okay, cool. And so none of our parents had any problem with us doing this. Again, no cell phones, guys. It's all payphones. And we had to pay for the payphones out of our own money because that was a part of the responsibility of that time. And if we did not get home by the time that they had said, we just lost this freedom for an extended amount of time. We knew our parents said what they meant and meant what they said. It's not that my other two friends, who were kind of newer to the group of Tim and I, didn't come up with some kind of crazy ideas of, oh, look, we're in the Dalles. Nobody's here that knows us. We could do this. And Tim and I look at each other, and then we'd look back at them and go, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not doing it. And they're like, why? That'd be fun. I'm like, dude, we're in the Dalles. Which one of our friends gets this much freedom? We're not blowing this. And so that part of the nurturing, a part of the boundaries, helps your kids to learn how to be able to boundary themselves.
And it started, in your case, with silly putty rules.
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
Everything associated with that.
Right.
So that you had the skills at age 17 to be 4 hours away.
4 hours.
And your parents were like, well, just be home by, 9 or whatever it was.
Right. And they were like, good with that. They're like, hey, call us if something happens, and they went to bed. They didn't even stay up, guys. They were like, be quiet when you come in, or we'll be talking about that. But
that's funny.
Yeah, we had that. And that's the thing, is the more that you get in there and get into the dirt of nurturing and parenting your kids, the more they're going to gain this, and the easier it gets down the road. Will they have their moments? Yes, they will. But there'll be moments rather than a constant, continuous chaos.
Right.
It's something that will happen within their life rather than you've got to find people to figure out, what their life even is.
You've been listening to the Empowering Choices Parenting Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, we would encourage you to visit our website at empoweringchoices.community. For a small monthly fee, we offer a website full of parenting courses and resources. You also have the ability to connect with parents going through the same struggles you are in a safe and private environment. Every time you purchase a membership to our site, we give away a membership to a parent in financial need. Help yourself become a better parent while helping others gain access to important parenting materials by supporting our podcast. Check us out at empoweringchoices.community or in the App Store by searching Empowering Choices. We'll see you on our next episode.